and I can ask the question.
So yeah, what is the difference between monastic life or religious life and married life, or even sometimes single life, people who weren't able to marry for different reasons also? I think it's important to shed some clarity on that. I'm not sure I would be able to name various books, but I will try to give different references or points of discernment in order to help shed some clarity. Many people who were called to follow Jesus and were in one of these, let us say, marriage and monastic life, no, were already in one of these two choices, felt the sort of the call, or and especially marriage toward monastic life. But let us also, the single consecrated in chastity, poverty, and obedience, they look at the married people, and married people look at the others. And this has a very deep meaning, because each one sheds a light toward the other one. To a certain extent, it's not either or, it's let us reach the core of both of them. Both are called to reach the core. It's a very profound and still delicate comparison, but I think it's very important. Do you have a better writer, poetic writer, who talks about the love of Jesus and the bride and the groom better than John of the Cross? Very difficult to find. And he's not married, of course. And there are no other stories around here and there that some people fantasize, know that he might have had one of the nuns or as an inclination, nothing more, no, a gentle inclination toward one, or preference or something. People love to fantasize St. Francis and St. Chiara and the rest. Now, it doesn't mean that they are human beings. They have their emotions, they have their needs, their emotional needs. Nobody can escape from that. This is why the desert fathers always say, you go to the desert, but the world is with you in the desert. It is inside of you.
Exactly.
So we need always to keep this in mind. And consecration and all the emotions and chastity issues, etc., they don't disappear. You're still a human being. You're not castrated. You don't remove that. This is an energy that God will need with its ups and downs, difficulties, etc. Chastity is not to get rid of. Chastity is to, by the grace of God, try to walk on a razor sharp line. So if you don't count on the grace of God, you fall on one side or you fall on the other side. Now, the history of consecration from day one and the history of spiritual life are very much linked, but we have so many different stories that help us answer the question you're asking. And even starting with the father of all monks, St. Anthony the Great, 3rd century, 3rd, 4th, I think, 3rd century, who his life is written by Saint Athanasius, and we have the sayings of the Desert Fathers, and one of the stories is allegedly attributed to him. It's about him. after so many years of fighting and you know, the spiritual warfare, he one day asked the Lord to show him what he can do, something new to do that he hasn't done before, because he wants to grow. You know, these are like athletes, spiritual athletes, so they want, you have the hunger for more, for better, for purer, for you see that it's normal. No, you have this, and the Lord reveals to him something of really very deep meaning, and maybe it starts a little bit to answer our question, which is, what is the difference between monastic life and married life, and how can we discern, and how can we also listen to our yearnings? No, I am yearning to this or that life, you know, and I can't. The Saint Gemma Galgani, I don't know if you heard about her. She was third order Redemptorist, I think. Gemma Galgani. All her life, she wanted to be a nun. All her life. She's a saint. All her life. The maximum she would reach was to be a third order of that order, Redemptorist, I think. It's an Italian order, you see. She never becomes a nun. All her life she suffers from that and never reaches it. But she's a saint, you see. So you see, we need to discern what is this yearning, to understand exactly what is the root of this yearning in order to fulfill it. Otherwise, St. John of the Cross, he was yearning to leave the unreformed yet non-reformed form of life and go to become a Carthusian monk. And Teresa of Avila stops him just before he goes. Did he continue to yearn for that life? Did he apply that life in his life? It's possible. It's very possible. You see, sometimes you yearn for that, and for many years, and you are searching for your vocation. Before telling the story about St. Anthony, I would like also to clarify something that maybe sheds a light. In the ancient understanding of monasticism, and I'm here referring to the Desert Fathers, the structure, the understanding of the vocation, the top of the vocation is eremitic life. So you start first by living in a community. And if after many years of, you know, friction and purification, because fraternal life creates that friction and tension, and this helps charity, real charity, to blossom and develop. If the person has enough balance, emotional, physical, common sense and balance, etc., and if he feels the call, he talks to the various superiors, and then if he has the permission, then he goes deeper in the desert, like 3 miles away, alone in a cave, and then he continues the rest of his life there. Maybe they bring him food from time to time. But so eremitic life was considered as the goal, the final goal, which looks a little bit strange if we just look at it from a state of life perspective. And it could be also seen as an egoistical solution, which is you're not doing anything. Of course he's doing everything, but we don't see it. That's the thing. So later on, I might come back to that point, why eremitic life was considered traditionally as the summit, the achievement. If you really want to achieve, it's that. And the paradox is there. Well, then how are you useful to other people? It's the same problem with, for instance, any monk, any nun, like cloistered nun, Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, shut in between 4 walls, and she contributed in the salvation of the world. So how do you resolve also this equation? And it helps in the process of discernment that we are talking about. So let us now come back to St. Anthony. Sorry, I might be jumping, but there is a unity, at least for me. Uh, uh, Saint Anthony the Lord shows him. He says, "I want you to go and visit a man, a shoemaker in Alexandria." Alexandria is considered the biggest city at that time. It's a little bit like, I don't know, say New York or London today, no? It's the city of sin, also a variety of communities, Jews, Christians, pagans, etc. So, and heretics also of all sorts. So he goes there, he takes his stick, and then he walks. Still a very long journey, but if you see the monastery, where the monastery is closer to the Red Sea, so he has to cross the Nile also, and then travel toward Alexandria. It's the places are there, we can see them geographically right now. He arrives there, he sits beside, he finds God shows him this shoemaker, and then he sits beside him. This is how the story is told anyway. And he asks him, what is your daily effort? You know, as a monastic life, you have the work, and the work is not working by hands. The work is the spiritual work. You are doing something spiritually. Think of the warfare, the spiritual warfare. There is an effort that you are supposed to produce. So what is your effort? What are your deeds? Because he wants to compare and wants to learn. So he's married. He fasts, but not comparable to Saint Anthony. Saint Anthony says, "Well, no, I am beyond that. I eat almost nothing, and you still eat something, even though you fast." Yeah. And the poverty, and he goes through everything, and still Anthony is way beyond him. So it's like Anthony asking God silently. It's like, well, where is the difference then? Then. This is about some defects of the monks also. They hear some women passing through, and he says, the shoemaker says, when I pray, and I always say to the Lord that all these people will go to heaven and I will go to hell, because of my sins. Saint Anthony starts to feel here that there is some difference here, and then he says, but also these women, you know, women of a certain category. I don't want to use the word, you see. So Anthony says, the shoemaker says, yes, even them, they are going to heaven and I'm going to hell because of my sins. The story says Anthony now got the message, took his stick, and went back to his cave for some more years of warfare. So it's very interesting here that the founder, the head of monastic life, after, of course, many years, and he's in this sense absolutely superior to any other athlete, spiritual athlete, I would say, still learned a lesson from a lay person. So the superiority doesn't come necessarily from the state of life, but it comes from what God is achieving in our heart. Remember Saint Augustine preaching, seeing an old lady there attending Mass, and he says, this lady knows better than I do. Knows not knowledge, theological knowledge, but the knowledge of God, knowing God, no? And even the Lord himself, he is the first one to give the example, no? Watching how everybody gives to God. And he says, but this lady gave more than all the others, and she's a widow, and she's a poor person, maybe not of any culture or anything, and in the eyes of God, she's better. No, she's not a nun. She's etc. Saint John of the Cross offers his best work, his last work, to a widow. Living Flame is not written for a nun; it's written for a lay person. So it tells you the intention. It is true. It is true that still recently, till almost Vatican II, we were structuring the church this way. You had the priest, you had the consecrated in three, not in two. And the consecrated, and then you had the poor lay people whom they might be saved, but God knows how. We, of course, we crossed a huge step here. And but still I think there is some deepening that we need to go through, because there is, one can be called, and I think all of us are called to, at a certain point in their life, to a deepening of spiritual life, but this is independent from the state of life. So a call for spiritual life, regardless of the state of life, within a state, any state, that's something. And a call for a certain state of life, that's something else. Now, of course, religious life, consecrated life, is supposed to boost, to allow, to be the habitat of that spiritual life and increase it. So the means help the goal. But does this mean that married life is an obstacle? St. Paul seems to say it, but I think this is a superficial reading of what St. Paul says, just a parenthesis in a sentence. No, I think that he says, no, I want to avoid you. If you're not married and God calls you, well, then don't marry. It's an advice. It's not an order, etc. So I want to avoid for you a lot of suffering, etc. What does it mean? I mean, do you think that religious life, cloistered nuns, etc., don't suffer? Saint Teresa of Avila says that they suffer much more than any other people. Why? Because contemplative life is an inner space of more delicate movements, and it creates a lot of suffering. A lot of suffering. Imagine yourself enclosed, living with 15, 25 other persons, the same for the rest of your life, with all the different temperaments, etc., and all the friction. It can become very easily a hell. And I measure my words. I mean my words. No, knowing a little bit that world. So I think that distinguishing clearly between the call for spiritual life and the call for a state of life is important. Adding to that marriage is not necessarily alien or diverting the attention from a spiritual endeavor. So here, let me then boil it down a little bit. Of course, I hear people will say, okay, well, then what's the point of consecrating ourselves? I think, is it our initiative? If you think that you want that, well, that's a bit dangerous, no? It's God's call. It's God's call to this state of life or that state of life, whenever it appears. And in my humble opinion, the development of spiritual life comes before the state of life in importance. In the sense, say we have a young man or a young woman. They are searching for their vocation, which is not our case, you and me. They are searching for their vocation. They are suffering because they don't know what is, where they will end up. Will they consecrate themselves in religious life? If he's a man, will he become a priest? Or rather marriage? And it's possible that while people are asking this question, they can already be in a relationship also, both with the Lord and with a person, no? So marriage could be there. And there is nothing wrong with that. People who consecrate themselves, they still have a heart and they still want to marry and have children. But the call is a call, and God will fill that heart and this desire to have children in a different way. This is why, as I said, they both look at each other and shed a light on each other.
Yes.
The fruitfulness of marriage reminds the religious people of the necessity of bearing fruits. The religious life reminds the married people that bearing fruits is not only the children. It has more of a dimension to it. You see, they speak to each other.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
Consecrated life have Jesus as their own groom, the beloved, totally. And this is the original, and marriage has a photocopy. And I always say to the nuns, when I teach them, I say, you have the original, and lay people have, the married people have the photocopy. They will have to work a lot in order to reach the original. So in this sense, religious life reminds us of our baptism, because baptism, you're dressed in white. Even a little baby who dresses in white because he's the bride of Jesus. There is a nuptial dimension in fundamentally in our baptism. It's a nuptial relationship. He is the spouse. He died for me. You see, he is my everything. And I would even dare to say that the sacrament of marriage is a sacrament of two already married people to Christ. But unfortunately, 99% of the cases is not the case, because they are Christians, but they are not aware of the nuptial dimension, their personal nuptial dimension with Christ. So when they meet, they have a common in the best cases, they have a common Christian project. They want to have raise a good Catholic or Christian family. But they're not necessarily aware of that nuptial dimension with Christ, which is a deeper moment. So even in marriage, I think there are different levels, and we have to accept that we can be very busy with the children at a certain point, but then after the children grow up, etc., and then, of course, the children stay. They are still the children, even if they are very old. You still have the worry, etc. But there is a fruitfulness that is different. But before that fruitfulness is the discovery of Christ in a deeper way. And each has his or her own rhythm. Sometimes only the wife or the husband is very much into Christ. This is the majority of the cases, unfortunately. It's like this. And the other one, no. So you learn to wait. As Jesus waited for you, you learn to wait for your husband or your wife. And in the community is the same. You wait for your brother or your sister if you are a woman in a community. You see what I'm trying to say? So so you see, I think that we also need to remember that you have a schedule, roughly. You have a schedule. If you have a good spiritual life, either you are lay or married lay or single lay or consecrated or a priest, because these are different states, all of them, different states of life. At a certain point, when there is real fervor, spiritual fervor, you have spiritual direction and you have a schedule. You know the horarium, in Latin is horarium, which is the how your day is more or less how the management of your time. How do you manage your time? It's God's time, so how do you manage it? You pray that amount, and then you do this, and then you work. Monks do work. I always say to people, if you dream about monastic life, remember, monks do work. They can get drained by the work, and they can get sidetracked by their own work. Not to mention the parish priest. Sometimes they can be so absorbed by their work they forget completely to pray, and they got completely drained from any spiritual life. It does happen. It's what a married lay person, which is your question, or what a married lay person feel as threats. Do you think a parish priest doesn't have these threats? Do you think a religious doesn't have these threats? You will say, yeah, but he has his community. Without entering in details, there are plenty of communities where the risk is there, and the bad choices were made, and then it sort of disintegrates in busyness.
Yeah.
How many times you meet people? I don't want to be too rude, but you know, consecrated people who are running, I don't know, hospitals or schools, etc. And sometimes you wonder, I mean, where's God in the story? You know, it's becoming like a business. Of course, it's in the name of the church, in the name of this or that, or religious order, but in the end, so the risk, what I'm trying to say is not to speak badly about any person. That's not my intention.
No.
Everybody tries, and we are all on our journey. But what I'm trying to say is that if there is a difference between the state of life and spiritual life, but each state of life contains its own qualities and risks.
Yeah.
So to say that married life is a little bit like we used to read St. Paul in the past, no, certain passages of St. Paul in the past. Married life is really not for a spiritual life. It's for something else. It's finished. That this way of thinking, we don't think this way at all anymore. Diversions, distractions, busyness, to be busy with something else than the Lord. It's for everybody. So I have time for prayer, I have time for work, and I have to work. A monk who doesn't work, you send him out. It's finished. A monk who has the capacity to work and doesn't want to work, that he's not called for monastic life. He's just a lazy person. Go away. That's not for you. Monastic life is not an escape from the world. This is why you have discernment of vocation. You want to see is the person escaping from something, is the person avoiding something, is the person having some problems. I mean, we all have problems, fair enough, but let us understand that the motivation of the person is not the real motivation, you see. So monastic life has its own challenges and difficulties, and you have to work. If you don't want to work, well then, and you have to sleep. People think that monks sometimes don't sleep. No, monks do sleep. And if he doesn't sleep and eat. A good novice is a novice who eats well and sleeps well, and is a happy person. Otherwise, you're not in your place. No, you're not growing, you're not blossoming. So then we need to see what is happening there. No, because the goal is not to be a sad person. The goal is to be a happy monk and a happy married person and a happy single and a happy priest, etc. and so on. It's the challenge of life. I'm not saying that it's easy to find or to achieve immediately, but that's the goal. Now, so also one last thing, you observe something very interesting if you study the history and development of monastic life, which then will become consecrated life, because you will find the following. First, you leave the city completely, because the city is synonymous of sin, synonymous of impossibility of salvation. Save yourself. This is the starting point. This is why you have the fuga mundi. You are escaping from the world. The world are the cities. The desert is the place of spiritual warfare, but you're safe because you don't have all the temptations there. But of course, you have the devil himself who will come and then will play with you, or all the devils, not only one. So you understand what I'm saying? So there is the aspect of dying when you wear the scheme, which is the monastic official monastic clothes. The day of your consecration, you're flat on the wall, and wearing and being flat mean that you are dying to the world. You left the world. You are not supposed to go back to the world, you see. So it starts like that. Fuga mundi. There is no salvation in the city. You have to go out of the city and realize yourself. Find God. and we are searching for God only. There are no other, there's no double goals here. There's only one goal. I search for God. This is why I left everything and I'm in the desert. And by the way, the desert is really like pure desert, like, I don't know, Arizona or Nevada. It's like nothing, not a soul. The monastery maybe now, but then nothing else. Now, it moves on to, when you read the history, I'm drawing now closer to the Middle Ages. The monasteries will try to sort of get closer to the cities. Then they will enter the cities, but it could be still monastic, but it could also become now religious life. The mendicant orders, Dominicans, Franciscans, and then the Carmelite joined later on. So what is happening here? The city, place of no salvation. Now we are coming back to it slowly, but the rules are very strict. You have the enclosure, to the point that St. Vincent de Paul in the 17th century, he couldn't, the canon law at that time wouldn't allow his, the daughters, his daughters, no, the filles de la charité, no, the daughters of charity, they wouldn't be able to serve the poor. So he had to find a sort of glitch in the canon law by saying, okay, you will renew every year your vows, so you will never be nuns. You will be renewing the simple vows every year. So this will allow you to go out. So he had to find, you know, canon law was like closure, a nun cannot go out.
Right.
I'm just telling you the story of how we perceived consecration. But now from that time on, more and more and more. Not to talk about after Council Vatican II, sometimes in certain places, the inner enclosure disappeared completely. It's like any person can enter and go reach the monk or the nun's cell, and it's like, where is the line? There's no line. Why? Because the concept disappeared completely from the mind. Now, with Charles de Foucault, in the end of the 19th century, there is one more step after St. Vincent de Paul. And Jean de Foucault, I think he's blessed or saint now, I don't know.
I thought he was going to be canonized,
Yeah. So Charles de Foucault says, I want to live their life, a little bit like, I want to live their own life. I want to be dressed simply, and you are still consecrated, but here you are really changing the formula completely. You didn't leave Alexandria, you are living in Alexandria with the poor, their life. So you see how we are doing full circle. We're doing full circle. And it's not finished. It's not finished. Pius XII allows at a certain point, canon law again. Canon law is always theological. There are it follows or helps or supports theologically the changes. But they're not changes, they are developments. There's a big difference. So the canon law allows, at a certain point, Pius XII, the secular institutes. Opus Dei and Notre Dame de Vie of Father Mario Gena. These are two examples that I know. So what is happening here? They are consecrated. They don't walk on the street wearing the clothes. They don't show that they are consecrated. And they have normal jobs. They just live in small communities, 2 or 3 in one apartment. How do you call it? Condominium?
Condominium. Do regular jobs.
Absolutely. And these
some
are
like the worker priests.
This is beyond full circle. You understand what's happening here? Of course, they don't marry. And then the bomb of Vatican II, everybody, regardless of their states, are called to be holy and are supposed to work on that. So that's a big question now. It's like, okay, but how? We never heard of this before. We don't have a spirituality for married people. Now, of course, you did mention the existence of communities of consecrated men, consecrated women, and families. We have the Beatitude in France. I don't know in the United States. I'm sure you have something that is similar. And just give me a... So you see what's happening here. You have married people who live not in the same maybe structure, the physical structure house, but they're very close and they have their offices together, etc. So what is happening here? What is happening is that we did full circle. In a way, we can't, of course, we can't cancel completely, we can't delete consecration. It will always stay. That's important, not to be mistaken, no? But in the same time, spiritually wise, we reach a certain maturity that we never reached in the past to that point, because we always had third orders. Sorry, I never mentioned that. When I spoke about the mendicant orders, for instance, in the Middle Ages, and even a little bit before, you always had associated lay people. You have the begin, I don't know how you say it in English, the begins, which are which were communities of women gathered, or we are talking 14th, 15th century. So we had lay forms of, not consecrated, but very much committed to spiritual life. We shouldn't forget all these people. There's a long, we can write a book only on that. All the non-consecrated people who were attached. This is why we have all the third orders, all sorts of third orders. They have a share. But even till now, they're considered like a little bit of a second category. Intensity of spiritual commitment and spiritual life. Now, so what happened now? We reach a point where I think the city is not anymore seen as it was seen in the time of Saint Anthony. We still need to dedicate all our time and energy to God. We can't, that's all the challenge today, which is how can we take the shell and keep the contents, and to which extent we can do that. And by the shell, I mean the state of life of Saint Anthony, and the whole development of the history of consecration and spiritual life. What is the exact relationship between them? But we need to distinguish clearly. And we need also to see, as I tried earlier on, to see what is constant. We all have a body. We all have emotions. Majority, I wouldn't say everybody, but we all have a sexual life. We all have a great desire for God. But then some are called to be consecrated, some are not. And to be called to be consecrated doesn't mean that you are stronger. Sometimes you are weaker. I remember a homily one day of the superior of the Carmelites in the south of France saying, the day of the solemn vows, the final vows of one of the brothers, he said, he dared to say, we are not consecrated because we are better than others, it's because we are weaker than others. I found that very humble and truthful and deep. It's very interesting. The weaker you are, the more support you need. You need the structure. No? You know, the horarium becomes a structure of an entire community. So you're carried by that. But in that you have a risk, the risk of routine. The repetition of the routine could become a certain spiritual laziness.
Plateau.
That's accepted. I'm not saying anything new here.
Sure.
You have the mass every day, and where you are. You have all the offices. You have the all sorts of prayer, all sorts of activities. So it's a machine. No, it's very regular. Hence, regular life. We call it regular life. No? So it's very ordained. Everything is ordered in a very precise order. On one hand, it's easy if we understand the meaning of it. It frees you from a lot of worries. That's true. That's absolutely true. But it's supposed to free you so you can work on spiritual life. But it's not always the case.
Right.
So yes, we cannot deny the meaning of a style of life like that, a consecrated life. It is supposed to help.
Yes.
We are weak human beings, and sometimes the means could play against us because of routine, because of lack of being inquisitive in a way. No, Saint Therese of the Child Jesus is an inquisitive person, inquisitive mind. She has an inquisitive mind. She always wants to go to break certain appearances, and in order to reach the depth of them. And if you compare her mentality and the mentality of her historical context, the nuns, the family, France at that time, etc., she is like 200 years ahead in many aspects. Why? Same shell, the same reality compared to others, but lived in a completely different way. So the routine, she wasn't trapped by the routine, but the routine became an open window to, like a sacrament, an open window to a continuous exploration of the love of God and of God himself and of love of the others. So yeah, so I think today it's a fine line. We might be tempted to say, yeah, but okay, well then in this case, if everybody can have a spiritual life, then what's the point of having a religious life or a consecrated life? I think we should never fall into that extreme.
Oh, no.
But also we need to understand that there is a design from God. We don't know ourselves enough. We don't know what is good for ourselves. And think of Saint Gemma Galgani, she wanted to become a nun. She never became a nun. So you might have a yearning, but I think a discernment for this yearning should be realized, and a balance also, common sense balance of understanding. Yeah. So the discernment would be then, what I really want is not to be in the monastery necessarily, but what I want is God himself.
Yeah.
I'm yearning for the peace that God gives me. I'm yearning for a deep state of prayer. I'm yearning for all this and that. Then this will then lead us to discerning within prayer life what is real and what is allowed and what is not real. You see, Saint Teresa of Avila, from day one, when she writes, from the beginning of her writings, the book of her life, she says, yes, there are some people, God will give them some consolations, if you want. She's talking to her nuns. And she says, oh, but there are some who will not have any consolations, and God knows what he's doing. So if you don't have any consolation and you're still living your consecrated life, don't be upset or don't be surprised, because God knows what he's wanting, what he's doing, and probably you don't need it. So don't compare yourself with other people, etc., etc., etc. So you see, discernment within spiritual life of the yearning, I think, is important, because it could become very acute sometimes. I'm not saying it's your case or the case of others, but sometimes this yearning for a different life could become extremely acute. And it can really hurt and destabilize the person. So the person is not really giving himself or herself fully to where he or she is. I think formation is needed here and there, and it could be lacking here and there. So when I say here and there, I mean consecrated or lay. Spiritual formation is needed. Implementation of a certain style of life here and there is necessary. Even if in the consecrated life you have already the shell that sort of tends to shape you, but we need to be careful, because if you are not filling the shell with life, the shell can kill you instead of serving you. And in life, you don't have the shell, but you will then, by the grace of God and your effort, create a structure with a certain flexibility. Because I don't know, if you have children at a young age, it's hell. I mean, how can you have some order here? It's very difficult. So, but you need to have a certain order, because life, spiritual life without any order, that's not advised at all. You can't, at least in my belief. I don't think that's possible. That's reasonable. I'm not an uptight, I don't see it in an uptight way. At all. Exceptions are allowed, flexibility is allowed, but without structure at all, that's really not possible. Of course, it would be a blessing if both of them, the married couple, agree on a minimum. That would be good. And a certain freedom, of course, I think, and respect of the rhythm of the other is necessary. As you would do with your brothers or sisters if you are consecrated, you know, if you are capable by the grace of God of doing certain things and you see your brother is not doing them, well, be patient with your brother and don't look outside. Look at Christ. Focus your eyes on Christ. So again, spiritual life and all the structure of the day should be set up in the context of spiritual direction. And of course, it will include certain things. I think that it's relatively feasible. But what is not always available is the call for spiritual life in marriage. So you might have, because I think I know it's a bit tricky for certain people to understand what I mean by that, but I think I can be a very good Catholic, very committed to my parish, to God in my parish, very fervent, go to mass, help here, help there, very good person, etc. And you would be very surprised to discover that I don't have spiritual life, deep spiritual life. I have some prayers that I'm saying, and I'm very observant of that, but I don't have necessarily that personal relationship with Christ, these long moments of silence. No, that's not my cup of tea, you see. So this is why I say it's important also in our conversation, and for both, to have also the call at a certain point, or to prepare for it, to open the way for it, the call for spiritual life. Sometimes vocation and call of spiritual life coincide. I had the grace of being in a position to discern and help young vocations. You could see the gentleman. He had the call. It's very clear. He was involved in a university, in serious studies, etc. And then he received the call. He left everything, and now he entered. A very good person, very clean, very pure, very committed, deep spiritual life. Once more, great hunger, etc. The vocation is clear here, but here you notice that they both coincide. Consecration and spiritual life are one here. To the point that sometimes you can't disentangle them. They're also one. In others, they landed at the door of the convent or the monastery, you don't know how. They still entered. You can't stop them. You don't have, if you are a superior, you don't have the permission from God to stop them from entering, because sometimes you have to allow things to develop. You need to take care of them, you need to help them, but you can't stop them if they are developing, they are growing, you see. So the vocation here is not obvious 100%. You still have maybe some doubts. So you feed them, you form them, and you watch them growing. So you see here, what happens is that the spiritual side is not developed enough. But you can't stop life. You can't cut life. You have to allow. So the shell is stronger, which means they entered in a monastery. They will, after a year, finish their novitiate, and then they will start the journey of students, etc., etc. But spiritually is a bit less strong than compared to the other one. The other example I took before. So you see here, the spiritual call is important. So, well, thank you. You will give me in the end an average religious person, I mean, consecrated person, a monk or a religious, but spiritually wise, it's really average. This is why I'm saying the call to spiritual life is important. And to put consecration, religious style of life, and all the duties above spiritual life is a danger.
Yeah.
You become very busy, very worried, very observant, very fussy, very discussing of certain things that are not the core of why you are here. That's a temptation. On the other hand, the other side also the same thing. You need the call for spiritual life. You won't have the shell, but it will come from within. So,
yeah,
maybe for weaker and for stronger people, maybe, I don't know. But you need the call. Going back to my point, you need the call, because you can have a very good Catholic marriage, good values, going to mass, raising the kids, etc. But the call for spiritual life is still waiting a little bit. And then one day it becomes stronger. So you might say, okay, well, now I'm torn. Am I called to monastic life, or am I told? No, it's within the vocation or the state of life,
where you
married life, that something deeper is blossoming and developing, but I shouldn't confuse it. I should distinguish clearly spiritual life within my state of life and the consecration or becoming a monk or something else. So both are challenged by the need at a certain point, preferably before, but it's not the case, of a call for spiritual life, which is not to be mixed or confused with the state of life.
Yes, and that is the primary.
It should be, but you know, on one hand, job, business, and children are stronger than everything, and on the other hand, all the religious busyness and rules and things can sometimes kill just forget why we are here. I'm pushing it to the extreme, of course, in both cases, but it's just understand the correct challenge and identify the yearning. What is the core of this yearning? Why is it now becoming stronger and stronger? Why I yearn for God and more for God? But that's the normal development of spiritual life. It's not to be mixed or confused with my state of life. You see, I can be single, I can be married, I can be monk, and it's a blessing to have that development of spiritual life. And there is a difference between state of life and spiritual life. If I am already married or already a monk, already priest, already single, then I can't change that. Already single, that's a different problematic. But if I'm already married or already consecrated or a priest, I will not leave. I can't. I can't leave my marriage for God. That's total utter nonsense. I always say to people, for married people, one of the elements of your discernment is your house, your wife or your husband and your children come first. I even have people sometimes who help in the School of Mary. They say, "Oh, I'm sorry, my husband this or my wife is that." I say, "Look, your family comes first. I can't force you to do anything." That's of course me. My School of Mary is very flexible on that. I said, "Your life comes first. You you are bound to be there for your husband or your children, and not make excuses and leave your responsibilities, because this is where you find God. Like the nun who one day said to, you see, I'll give you an example of the yearning. A nun comes to Saint Teresa of Avila. They are living now, they are in a monastery, and she says to her, I feel a call to stay longer in the chapel. I want to practice more prayer of the heart, contemplative prayer. And while she was supposed to clean the dishes or to be in the kitchen, Saint Teresa of Avila says to her, you go to your kitchen. God is at the bottom of the pans. You see, that's a very deep indication here. God is at the bottom of the pans, which means I have the yearning, yes, but why can't I find God in my daily life, in my wife or in my husband, or hear him? This is the sacrament of marriage. The sacrament of marriage is the sacrament of two married people to Christ. They are married to Christ. Christ is at the center, alive. So when they meet, they listen to Christ and the other one. If my wife says something to me that is right, who am I to say, oh, because I don't know, we are upset or something, no, I won't listen to you. But it's Christ, I can't. You see, this is sacramentality. Physically, she's there. She's a human being, she's not Christ. And then just behind her or inside of her, it's my Christ that I'm trying to listen to. You see, this is why St. Paul says, obey to Christ before saying obey to each other. He said obey to Christ. And this is the key to understand.
Yes.
And it's the same. It applies in the monastery. I say it sometimes to the nuns just to shake the routine a little bit. I say, please never listen and obey to your superior.
Yes.
So of course they know me, so they are not totally scared, but they're still shocked. It's like, what do you mean by that? I say, no, you obey to your superior, you obey to a human being? No, that's not obedience. The vow of obedience presupposes faith, and faith presupposes seeing Jesus and listening to Jesus through the words of your superior. So if your superior tells you something and Jesus, you don't feel that this is coming from Jesus, you transformed obedience into just human obedience. And I'm asking you not to go for that. I'm asking you not to obey to your superior, to obey to Jesus. To obey Jesus, sorry. Well, my English, sometimes I make mistakes. To obey Jesus, who talks through her. So if you can't hear that, anyway, it's very easy to cook. To cook with your superior. Cook is is a French word. It's not. Don't apply it in the English way. It means you prepare a little bit your act of obedience. So you say, okay, you go and talk to your superior and say, okay, I would like to do this, and I feel very drawn to that. So you are really giving all the points that support your and even may add a little bit of emotions, manipulation, emotional manipulation, etc. So it's like your superior has to say yes. Is this obedience? No, obedience is to say, I have this, I have that. You decide, I don't mind. You choose this one, you choose that. You are already free before asking. And if he says no, you say to him, if you say no, I'm fine. I don't worry. It's fine for me. That's obedience. Yes. To somebody else, not to this man. And then when he talks or she talks, if she's a nun, then it's Christ. Then I'm fine. You see. So I think the challenge is if we look carefully, there is a full sacramentality here and there.
Yes.
In the sense that you're not dealing with walls. You're not dealing with opaque walls. Everything could be, depending on how you are formed, how you see things.
Yes.
Allow the light of Christ to reach you.
Yes.
Or it can become very opaque and you are a very sad person where you are, you see.
Yes.
So that, I think that's the true challenge, is Because what was the fuga mundi, the initial movement, the initial decision of St. Anthony?
To go toward God.
To leave, no, but what was the key? The city was non-sacramental, not allowing the light of God, not allowing any possibility for depth. We moved and understood better that it's in the heart and it's about what you want exactly, who you are searching for, and you are leaving everything else. But you don't need physically to move, you need to do it inside of you. So the spiritual journey told geographically by Saint Athanasius could be realized where I am, in the place where God put me or where circumstances put me. Say I am married, you see. So I'm not escaping my marriage in order to become a saint. I am entering deeper, paradoxically, in my marriage in order to become a saint. But of course, it requires a lot of discernment, because there are things where, you know, you have to respect the freedom of the other person.
Yes.
Sometimes you suffer a lot, sometimes misunderstanding, you know, it's not, but community life is the same. If you think that community life is a straightforward thing, it's hell.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about people I knew. I mean, it could become easily, because it's a little thing becomes a big mountain.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think this is the point. Do we believe that the state of life of marriage is not opposed to? Of course, the answer is yes. We believe that it is not opposed, but still, conceptually, initially, you would like to escape distractions and stay alone or in a peaceful place in order to be totally focused on God, no? It's like when you learn contemplative prayer, you don't want noise around you when you are doing it, no? It's the same. You want total silence. Please, no noise. I am in the chapel. Please don't make noise. Don't move the candles there. It's making noise, or don't click with your key. It's horrible. It's like there's too much noise there, or this baby is I can't pray. This baby here is making too much noise. I can't pray. You know, it's the same. No. So the question is it possible? I think the final question here is this one: is it feasible, possible, and feasible to find God in an apparent busy life as marriage? Yes or no? So if there is a call for spiritual life where I'm already there, of course, the good advice is yes, but the real answer is yes also. You will have a schedule the same, you will try to be organized the same, you will try to be faithful to it, and you will try to live it really. And your wife is your community.
Yes.
And trust me, the community and wife are playing the same exact role here and there, emotionally and service wise, it's the same. A community can be like a wife, can behave toward you like a wife, be very jealous, be very asking certain things, etc. I'm not saying that all wives are like this, but I'm saying that the mechanism is a little bit the same, because it's your community, you know, they want you. So it's so I think people who think that there is a real difference between the two, after a while, maybe not in the beginning, but after a while, I don't think.
You come to the root.
It's the same. It's the same. You have here and there duties. You have to wash the dishes here. You have to wash the dishes there. So even worse. I mean, sometimes, you know, when you take care of a baby or something, it's like when you wash the loo in the toilets in the monastery. No, it's you have to do it anyway. So is there really a difference? This is why I think that distinction is not separation, but
it's the complementary
between spiritual life. No, not the two states of life. Between spiritual life and state of life, I think that's fundamental. Without separating them excessively, but that is clarifying for ourselves would stop us from dreaming. No, oh, I would like to be a monk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but do you think the monk doesn't work? Do you think the
Yeah.
monk doesn't
Right.
deal with other people? Do you think the monk doesn't have to do certain duties? So why do you think that becoming a monk will be different from your actual life? So find happiness, find Jesus,
Yeah.
find that sacramentality. That would be, I think, the effort.
Yeah. That's beautiful.